Have you ever noticed how a single message can change your entire mood? How someone's silence can sit with you all day? Or how one unresolved problem keeps replaying in your mind long after everything else has moved on? Nothing dramatic happened, yet your peace quietly slipped away. Your body is still here, but your attention is somewhere else. Revisiting words, imagining outcomes, waiting for something to settle so you can finally relax. This is how most suffering begins, not with pain, but with mental involvement that never turns itself off. If this feels familiar, it's important to understand something clearly. You are not weak, broken, or overly sensitive. You are simply over-involved. Your mind keeps leaning toward things it cannot fix, people it cannot control, and outcomes it cannot predict. In Buddhist understanding, suffering grows when the mind tries to manage what it was never meant to carry. Peace doesn't disappear because life is loud. It fades because your attention stays entangled where it no longer belongs. In this video, we'll explore how detachment isn't about becoming distant or cold, but about reclaiming the calm that was always available to you. By the end, you'll understand why stepping back doesn't mean you care less. It means you finally stop exhausting yourself trying to hold what was never meant to stay in your hands. There is one insight near the end that most people miss, and it explains why real freedom begins not when life changes, but when your relationship with it does. Lesson 1. The exhaustion of emotional over-responsibility. Most people don't feel exhausted because life is demanding. They feel exhausted because they are carrying far more than their share. Not physical weight, but emotional weight. The quiet responsibility of managing other people's moods. The pressure to keep situations calm, even when they are not yours to stabilize. The guilt that appears without invitation, even when nothing harmful was done. This kind of exhaustion does not come from effort alone. It comes from caring in places where care slowly turns into self-neglect. Emotional over-responsibility often develops without awareness. You notice a shift in someone's tone and your mind immediately looks inward, asking what you did wrong. Someone is distant and you feel the urge to repair the distance, even when you don't know what caused it. You take on unspoken expectations and treat them like silent contracts you must honor. Over time, this creates a constant state of inattention. Your mind stays alert, scanning for emotional changes, preparing to respond before anything even happens. This is not kindness. It is a survival pattern that has gone unquestioned. From a Buddhist perspective, suffering increases when responsibility is misplaced. The mind suffers not because it cares, but because it carries what it was never meant to carry. Compassion was never meant to include ownership of other people's emotions, decisions, or healing. When responsibility expands beyond its natural boundary, peace begins to erode quietly. You may look calm on the outside, but inside there is fatigue, resentment, and confusion about why rest never truly arrives. Imagine walking through an airport, holding your own bag, and then picking up everyone else's luggage as well. At first, you manage. You adjust your grip. You tell yourself it's temporary. But as time passes, your arms grow heavy, your steps slow, and eventually you miss your own flight. This is what emotional over-responsibility does. You stay busy carrying what belongs to others, while your own life, needs, and clarity are left waiting at the gate. The key realization here is simple, but difficult to accept. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-neglect. Caring does not require sacrifice of your inner stability. Love does not demand that you absorb what drains you. When you take responsibility for what isn't yours, you slowly abandon yourself, even if your intentions are good. And the exhaustion you feel is not a failure. It is a signal that something needs to be returned to its rightful owner. So pause and reflect gently. What am I carrying that was never assigned to me? Whose emotions, expectations, or unresolved struggles have I mistaken for my responsibility? The moment you begin to release what was never yours, energy returns, clarity sharpens, and peace becomes possible again. This is not selfishness. It is wisdom. Lesson 2. Why caring harder never brings control. Many people believe that if they care more, things will finally feel secure. If they think harder, explain better, stay more alert, or love more intensely, then uncertainty will disappear. This belief feels responsible and mature, but quietly, it becomes a trap. Caring harder does not bring control. It only creates tension. Intensity may feel like commitment, but intensity without clarity slowly drains peace instead of protecting it. From a Buddhist perspective, this confusion is rooted in attachment. Attachment is not love itself. It is urgency pretending to be love. It is the fear that something might slip away if you loosen your grip for even a moment. When urgency enters the mind, it convinces you that relaxation is dangerous, that calm equals carelessness. But wisdom does not rush. Wisdom observes. The mind that is always tense cannot see clearly, no matter how deeply it claims to care. Psychologically, overcaring is often fueled by fear rather than devotion. Fear of losing someone, fear of being misunderstood, fear that chaos will unfold if you are not constantly attentive. These fears quietly push you to stay emotionally involved long after involvement stops being helpful. You monitor reactions, analyze tones, and scan for signs of approval or distance. What feels like love is often a nervous attempt to prevent pain before it arrives. This pattern shows up in ordinary moments. You over-explain yourself, hoping clarity will guarantee acceptance. You replay conversations in your mind, searching for the perfect response you wish you had given. You check how someone reacted, not once, but repeatedly, as if their response determines your safety. None of this brings control. It only keeps the mind busy and unsettled, chasing certainty that never fully comes. The deeper insight here is simple yet powerful. Calm presence influences life more than emotional force ever could. When you stop pushing, people feel less pressure. When you stop explaining, your words carry more weight. When you stay grounded instead of urgent, situations reveal themselves more honestly. Control loosens not because you care less, but because you stop confusing anxiety with devotion. Take a moment to reflect honestly. Where am I caring from fear rather than clarity? Where am I mistaking tension for love, urgency for responsibility? The moment you allow care to soften into presence, you regain something far more valuable than control. You regain steadiness. And from steadiness, real wisdom begins to act. Lesson 3. When you let others occupy your inner world, peace does not disappear all at once. It fades quietly when your mind stops being your own. Long after a conversation ends, the voices remain. Words replay. Imagined arguments continue. Unfinished emotional moments loop again and again, as if your mind is trying to reach a resolution that never arrives. The body may move on with the day, but inwardly you are still in the room, still explaining, still defending, still hoping something will finally settle. This is how others begin to occupy your inner world without ever asking for permission. Most of this occupation is invisible. It happens through remembered tones, facial expressions, pauses, or silences. You imagine what you should have said. You anticipate what they might say next. You prepare responses to conversations that may never happen. Each loop pulls a little more attention away from the present moment. You are not resting. You are hosting. And over time, this constant mental hosting becomes exhausting, even when nothing outwardly seems wrong. In Buddhist understanding, the mind was never meant to be crowded. It was meant to be clear, spacious, and responsive, not filled with noise that belongs to yesterday or to someone else's inner world. When the mind becomes overfilled, clarity weakens. Peace becomes fragile. You begin reacting to thoughts instead of reality, and the present moment loses its authority. A helpful way to understand this is through a modern metaphor. Think of your mind like a phone with many apps running in the background. Each app seems harmless on its own, but together they drain the battery. Old conversations are one app, imagined arguments are another. Unfinished emotional loops keep running silently, consuming energy even when you're not actively engaging with them. The result is constant mental fatigue and a sense that rest never fully recharges you. The key truth here is simple and powerful. Not everyone deserves access to your inner dialogue. Just because someone crossed your path does not mean they should live inside your thoughts. Just because something was painful does not mean it deserves unlimited attention. When you allow every voice to echo inside you, your own voice becomes harder to hear. So pause and reflect honestly. Who still has access to my thoughts without permission? Whose words, reactions, or absence continue to shape my inner state? The moment you begin reclaiming that space, peace doesn't need to be forced. It returns naturally because your mind finally has room to breathe again. Lesson 4. Stepping back without becoming cold. One of the deepest fears people have about detachment is the fear of becoming cold. Stepping back can feel like abandonment, as if creating space means you no longer care, no longer love, or no longer stand with others. Many people stay emotionally entangled, not because it brings peace, but because they are afraid of what stepping back might say about them. They worry that distance means indifference, and so they remain close even when closeness is slowly costing them their clarity. Buddhist wisdom offers a gentler understanding. Detachment is not rejection, it is space. It is the ability to remain present without being consumed. When the mind steps back, it doesn't turn away from life. It creates the conditions to see life more honestly. Detachment allows care to breathe. Without space, care collapses into confusion. With space, it matures into understanding. Imagine standing in the middle of a busy road. Cars rush past from every direction. Your senses are overwhelmed. You cannot see patterns, only danger. Now imagine stepping onto a balcony above the street. The traffic is still there, but your relationship to it has changed. You can see movement, direction, and flow. You are no longer forced to react to every passing moment. This is what emotional distance offers. Life doesn't disappear, but your mind stops being assaulted by it. When you stay too close to chaos, clarity becomes impossible. You absorb every tone, every reaction, every shift in mood. Your emotions begin to mirror the noise around you. You confuse intensity with connection, and urgency with responsibility. But space changes the experience entirely. Space allows emotions to settle. It gives thoughts time to organize. It turns reaction into observation. This is why stepping back is not withdrawal. It is discernment. It is choosing to see before you act, to listen before you respond, and to understand before you carry weight that does not belong to you. Distance doesn't make you less caring. It makes your care cleaner. It removes the emotional static that distorts judgment. The emotional payoff of this shift is profound. When you create space, truth rises naturally. You begin to notice what is yours to address and what is not. You stop personalizing what was never about you. You recognize patterns instead of being trapped inside them. Clarity emerges, not because life became simpler, but because your mind stopped standing in the middle of the noise. Take a moment to reflect. What becomes clearer when I stop standing in the middle of the noise? Where might a step back bring understanding instead of loss? Detachment, when practiced wisely, doesn't close the heart. It steadies it. Lesson 5. Stop trying to repair what life is still teaching. Many people carry an identity they rarely question: the fixer. You step in quickly when something feels uncomfortable. You offer solutions before silence has time to speak. You take responsibility for other people's growth, healing, or emotional stability, believing that if you don't act, things will fall apart. At first, this feels helpful, even noble, but over time, it becomes exhausting because you are trying to complete lessons that life has not finished teaching. The fixer identity often forms early. You learn that being useful earns connection, that solving problems keeps peace, that stepping in prevents loss, so you intervene too soon. You soften consequences that were meant to teach. You carry emotional weight for others, so they don't have to feel it themselves. What looks like care on the surface slowly turns into overreach beneath it. You are no longer supporting life, you are interrupting it. From a Buddhist perspective, interference delays understanding. Wisdom unfolds through experience, not rescue. When you constantly step in, you block the natural process through which clarity develops. Some discomfort is not a mistake, it is instruction. Some confusion is not failure, it is part of learning. By trying to repair everything immediately, you prevent insight from forming, both in others and in yourself. This pattern shows up clearly in modern life. You keep saving relationships that have already shown you their limits. You invest energy trying to make people change who have not chosen growth. You take responsibility for emotions that belong to someone else, believing that your effort can stabilize what they have not yet faced. And each time, you walk away tired, resentful, or quietly empty, wondering why peace never lasts. The deeper truth is this: not every problem is meant to be fixed by you. Some lessons only emerge through space. Growth requires friction. Awareness requires time. When you remove every difficulty, you also remove the opportunity for transformation. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop confusing control with compassion. There is a quiet wisdom in allowing life to teach what only life can teach. When you step back, you give situations room to reveal their truth. You allow people to meet their own edges. You stop carrying outcomes that were never yours to manage. And in that space, something unexpected happens. Your own energy begins to return. Letting go of the fixer role is not abandonment, it is alignment. It is recognizing where your responsibility ends and where life's responsibility begins. It is choosing to support growth without hijacking the process. When you do this, you stop exhausting yourself trying to force understanding into existence. Take a moment to reflect honestly. What am I interrupting instead of allowing? Where am I stepping in too early, solving too much, or carrying lessons that are not mine to complete? The moment you release what was never yours to repair, clarity deepens, effort softens, and peace finds its way back to you. Quietly, naturally, and without force. Lesson 6. Detachment is returning to yourself. Most people believe they lose peace because of what others do. In reality, peace is usually lost much earlier, in the quiet moments when you step away from yourself. You say yes when your body is already saying no. You agree, adjust, and accommodate even as something inside you tightens. Over time, these small betrayals accumulate. You may still function, still show up, still care, but you are no longer fully present with yourself. This is where peace begins to thin. Self-abandonment rarely feels dramatic. It feels practical. You tell yourself it's easier to avoid conflict. You prioritize approval over truth because being accepted feels safer than being honest. You silence your needs to maintain harmony. Each decision seems minor, but together they pull you away from your center. You become skilled at reading others while slowly losing contact with your own inner signals. Buddhist teaching points to a simple but often overlooked truth. Detachment is not about turning away from life. It is about returning to your inner seat. When you are centered, life can move around you without knocking you off balance. When you abandon that center, every opinion, reaction, or expectation has the power to sway you. Detachment restores that inner position where awareness sits calmly, watching without being dragged. Imagine leaning forward all day, your muscles engaged, your breath shallow, your attention stretched outward. This is how many people live emotionally, constantly leaning toward others, toward outcomes, toward approval. Now imagine finally sitting back. Your shoulders drop, your breath deepens. Nothing has been solved, yet something fundamental has changed. You are no longer straining. You are supported. This is what returning to yourself feels like. The insight here is profound. Peace begins when loyalty returns inward. Not selfish loyalty, but honest loyalty. The kind that listens when the body signals fatigue. The kind that honors inner discomfort before it turns into resentment. The kind that values alignment over applause. When you stop leaving yourself to maintain connection, connection becomes healthier and more real. Detachment, then, is an act of self-respect. It is the choice to stay with your truth even when it's inconvenient. It is the courage to pause instead of immediately accommodating. It is the willingness to disappoint others slightly, so you don't continue disappointing yourself deeply. This shift doesn't make you distant, it makes you grounded. Take a moment to reflect quietly. Where have I been living away from myself? Where have I been leaning forward when I needed to sit back? The more you return to your own center, the less the world can pull you off balance. Peace does not come from controlling life. It comes from finally coming home to yourself. Lesson 7. Emotional distance creates inner mastery. Most people believe mastery comes from being more involved, more alert, more reactive. When emotions rise, they move closer, leaning into every detail, every tone, every shift in energy, believing that proximity will give them control. But emotional closeness does not create mastery. It creates noise. When you are too close to a situation, your vision narrows, your reactions speed up, and your clarity quietly disappears. Emotional closeness pulls you into the center of experience. You feel everything immediately and intensely. Someone's words trigger a response before understanding has time to form. A problem appears, and the body tightens, rushing toward action. In these moments, reaction feels necessary, even responsible. But reaction is often the voice of habit, not wisdom. It is driven by fear, memory, and urgency rather than awareness. Buddhist understanding offers a different path. Awareness grows with space. When the mind creates distance, it does not disconnect. It becomes capable of seeing. Space allows emotions to settle instead of collide. It gives thoughts room to organize rather than overwhelm. Detachment, in this sense, is not withdrawal from life. It is a shift in position from inside the storm to a place where the storm can be observed. Imagine stepping out of a crowded, noisy room. Inside, voices overlap, sounds collide, and it's difficult to think clearly. The longer you stay, the more irritable and reactive you become. Now imagine stepping outside into fresh air. The noise fades instantly. Your breath deepens. Your senses reset. Nothing inside the room has changed. Yet your ability to understand what's happening has transformed. Emotional distance works the same way. The moment you step back, the chaos loses its grip. This is the key shift where mastery begins. Response replaces reaction. A response is spacious. It includes choice. It considers timing, truth, and consequence. A reaction is immediate and often regretful. When you react, life pulls you. When you respond, you meet life from a place of steadiness. Emotional distance creates the pause where wisdom lives. In daily life, this shift appears in subtle ways. You stop answering messages immediately when emotions are high. You allow yourself to breathe before speaking. You observe patterns instead of personalizing moments. You notice that many things you once reacted to no longer demand your energy. This is not indifference. It is discernment. Inner mastery does not mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings no longer command you. You can feel anger without becoming it. You can feel sadness without drowning in it. You can feel care without collapsing into urgency. This is the strength that Buddhist philosophy points toward. Not emotional numbness, but emotional sovereignty. When you step back consistently, another truth reveals itself. Many situations resolve on their own when you stop interfering with reactive energy. People show you who they are when you are no longer trying to manage them. Clarity arrives not through effort, but through space. Take a moment to reflect honestly. What truth appears when I step back instead of stepping in? What becomes visible when I stop reacting and start observing? Emotional distance is not avoidance. It is the foundation of inner mastery, and from that mastery, peace stops being fragile and starts becoming stable, steady, and deeply rooted within you. Bonus lesson: the mind that no longer needs approval. One of the deepest sources of suffering is rarely discussed openly, yet almost everyone feels it. It is the need for approval, not appreciation, not connection, but validation, the quiet dependence on how others see you in order to feel steady inside. This need shapes decisions, silences truth, and keeps the mind on constant alert. When approval becomes necessary, peace becomes conditional. From a Buddhist perspective, freedom begins the moment approval loses its authority. As long as your worth depends on being accepted, praised, or understood, your inner state remains vulnerable. Every opinion becomes a verdict. Every reaction becomes a signal. The mind no longer rests in itself. It waits to be confirmed. This waiting is exhausting, because no amount of approval ever feels complete or permanent. Imagine your mind as a house with many doors. Over time, you've left most of them open. Opinions walk in freely. Judgments enter without invitation. Expectations rearrange the space. You may not even notice how much influence these visitors have, but you feel the result: tension, self-doubt, hesitation, and the constant urge to adjust yourself to fit what you think is expected. Closing these unnecessary doors is not isolation. It is discernment. The emotional breakthrough comes when you see a simple truth. Opinions reveal other people's minds, not your worth. What someone thinks, says, or feels is shaped by their history, their fears, their unmet needs. When you allow those opinions to define you, you give away your center. Detachment restores that center by reminding you that your value does not require agreement to exist. This shift creates a powerful change in identity. You stop asking, "Do they accept me?" and begin asking, "Am I aligned with myself?" That single change alters how you speak, how you choose, and how you stand in the world. Alignment brings calm. Self-trust replaces approval seeking. You become quieter inside, not because you've withdrawn, but because there is less inner conflict to manage. A mind that no longer needs approval becomes steady. It listens without absorbing. It considers feedback without collapsing into it. It remains open without being exposed. This is not arrogance. It is maturity. It is the understanding that your inner direction matters more than external permission. Take a moment to reflect honestly. Who would I become if nothing needed approval anymore? What choices would feel lighter? What truths would finally be spoken? When approval loses its power, the mind rests where it always belonged, within itself. And in that resting, real freedom begins. Closing reflection. When you put the weight down. As this moment settles, notice how the idea of peace has shifted. Peace doesn't return when everything is solved or when people finally behave the way you hoped. It returns when responsibility becomes selective, when you stop carrying what was never meant to live in your hands. Detachment does not create distance from life. It restores clarity inside it. When your energy is no longer scattered across people, problems, and outcomes you cannot control, something steady begins to take shape within you. It's important to remember this gently. You do not stop caring when you step back. You stop collapsing. You stop abandoning yourself in an effort to hold everything together. Care becomes quieter, cleaner, and more honest. Instead of urgency, there is presence. Instead of tension, there is discernment. You remain open to life without being pulled apart by it. This is not withdrawal. It is maturity. Now imagine, just for this evening, putting the weight down. The weight of responsibility that never belonged to you. The weight of fixing, managing, explaining, and holding things in place. Let your shoulders soften. Let the mind settle back into itself. Ask yourself slowly, without needing an answer right away. What would rest finally feel like if I put the weight down tonight? If this reflection brought even a small sense of relief, allow yourself to sit with it for a moment. You don't need to analyze it or share a long response. If you'd like, leave a single word in the comments that captures how your body feels right now. And if this kind of quiet clarity supports you, you're welcome to stay with the channel for more reflections like this.